Founded in 1637, the area now known as Duxbury was named by Miles Standish after wooded land in his hometown in Great Britain. Settled for over 9,000 years by indigenous peoples, it grew into a farming and shipbuilding community with myriad stories to tell. For more than 14 years, historian and archivist Carolyn Ravenscroft has provided a window into those stories of the past. Next up, Tiff Phillips talks with Carolyn on our podcast, Open Here.
I am with historian and archivist from the Duxbury Royal Historical Society, Carolyn Ravenscroft. Thank you so much for coming in today. It's so great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. This is fun.
Yeah. So where did you always know that you were going to be into history growing up? Was that something that you just had the passion for?
Yeah, I was definitely that kid. I always loved history. I always thought that I would be in some sort of profession that would take me in the historical route. But of course, once you get your undergraduate in history, there's not a lot of avenues right off the bat unless you're going to be a teacher. So I kind of shelved the history idea and did a variety of work. But I went back to graduate school in my 30s and became an archivist. And that has led me to where I am today. But as far as growing up loving history, absolutely. I mean, give me a house museum at age 12 and I'm happy as can be.
Do you have a specific kind of history that you're like a genre of history, so to speak, that you're into?
Yes. So if you had asked me back in my undergraduate days, I would have said, oh, I long to be a medievalist. Like, what young woman sometimes doesn't want to study medieval history? But that avenue was never going to progress for me, particularly because I didn't know Latin and had no desire to learn it. But I am very much situated in American history, early 19th century American history. So my forte, which aligns perfectly with Duxbury, would be around the time of the American Revolution until the Civil War, although my master's thesis was about the Civil War. But really, I'm an antebellum historian.
So you're from the Cape originally. How did you find your way to Duxbury?
Oh, like so many of us here in Massachusetts, a kind of a zigzag pattern, but I was raised on Cape Cod, good graduate of DY High School, and then was in Boston for many years until I was in the South Coast for a while, and then my family, my then husband and children, we decided to transition to Duxbury, and I have never regretted that move, which took place, I think, in 2007.
So what makes Duxbury so special, you think?
Duxbury's history is just so rich. I have a phrase, all roads lead to Duxbury. No matter what history you're talking about, somehow I can find a relation to Duxbury history. And so although it is a small seacoast town in Massachusetts, the tendrils of its history go all the way across the country. I mean, I think you may remember last year our fundraiser was on the gold rush because we had a number of men and some women who went to the gold rush. So as the historian for the society, I can bring in a lot of diverse history, even with the jumping off point of a small New England town.
So for those who don't know, what does a historian and an archivist do?
So first and foremost, when I was hired by the Historical Society, I was a straight up just the archivist. And an archivist is very much akin to a librarian. I got my master's in librarianship from Simmons University with a specialization in archival work. And an archivist works in an archives, and my job is not to take care of books, but the old documents. So under my purview, I have thousands of letters, maps, diaries, logbooks, receipts, anything you can think of that is paper or map or book based that is historical. The Historical Society in Duxbury, we have been collecting for about 100 years, and we have a vast, vast collection going from a book published in 1609 and a letter written in 1662, or 42 rather, all the way up to almost the present day. We still collect, we actively collect. And so as an archivist, again, my job is to take care of that, to process it, to make it available for people, to facilitate people coming to look at it. And then my job morphed into also being the historian for the society. So I also have my master's in history, which helps in that role. And in that capacity, I am responsible for bringing historical content to people. So whether it's via lectures, tours, cemetery tours, tying in our fundraising events with historical events in Duxbury history, our King Caesar Christmas, coming up with ideas that relate to Duxbury history. So it takes up more of my job now than the archival work, but it's my favorite.
That's your favorite part of your
Mhm.
job. What about, are people in Duxbury genuinely interested in their history?
For sure, yes. And we work hard to bring new people into the fold to be interested in history by having very exciting events to draw people in. But Duxbury has always been very much involved in their history. The Historical Society, or if you notice that the name has rural in it, because we are one of the oldest land conservation organizations in the country. So we started out as the Rurals, but very soon became a historical society as well. So there was a great love of Duxbury history from the get-go. But you can see the continuing love of history because in Duxbury, since 1968, we have had a program. We call it date boarding, but basically what it is homeowners can get their house, if it's an antique, researched, and they get the plaque. You see many towns have different ways of doing that. Ours is called date boarding, responsible by the Historical Society. I do the date board research now, and in the last 3 years, I think I've done 50. So there is definitely a growing appetite for Duxbury history.
So why should we know about our history? Why should we know about where we come from?
Well, the old adage is obviously true. If we don't learn our history, we are destined to repeat it. And there's a lot of things going on in the world today that have direct links to things that happened in history or mirror them greatly. So often when I do a lecture or a tour, I spend a lot of time drawing parallels between things that happened in history and things that are going on today. So people don't just think, oh, in the olden days, they thought this way. I try and ask people to place themselves in situations today which are very similar to those in history. And how did those work out? What were the things that didn't work or did? And try and make it relevant. I think that's one of the most important things is making history not only to remember our own heritage, but to make it relevant to today.
Do you have a favorite historical fact about Duxbury?
I have like a favorite, not necessarily like a factoid, but one of the greatest research projects that I spearheaded is discovering how many women from Duxbury went to sea. And that was great, not only bringing women's stories to light in Duxbury, but also revealing that so many wives went to sea with their husbands. It changes the whole way we look at how the 19th century Duxbury community operated. So that bit of knowledge, I don't think as a historian you often, as a public historian working in a small town, often get the opportunity to kind of switch the script so much as that research did. And so it's dear to my heart, but also unbelievable stories, shipwrecks, hurricanes, births and deaths at sea. It's just a great story, many great stories.
You had mentioned before that you do a lot of cemetery tours.
Mhm.
What do you think draws people to that kind of like macabre?
So oftentimes people sign up because they think that they're going to get the spooky story tour. And it's bait and switch.
Right.
Because my tours, I really think there's no better place to learn history than in a cemetery.
Fair, yeah.
I have been able to bring in so much history into those tours. I've done tours where we just talk about veterans. So we talk about the history of the various conflicts that we've had, and the people that served. I've done immigration stories. I've done women's history stories. I've done just general history stories, shipbuilding, almost anything. You can tweak it. And then you're out in the fresh air. People are walking around. Our cemeteries are beautiful in Duxbury. So it's a great afternoon to learn about history. And you don't even feel like you're learning about it. I often bring funny quotes from the people of the graves we talk about. I'm always one to bring in humor as a public historian, entertainment.
Right.
As long as the facts are true, there's no reason why you can't be entertaining as well. And I just think cemetery tours are a fabulous way to get out and learn about the community and the people that lived in it.
What advice do you have for aspiring historians out there, maybe young people who are just looking to get into it?
Learn cursive.
I love that.
It's the bane of my existence at the moment, and I can foresee problems with young budding historians as they get older. In order to be a historian, you have to read primary documents. So, I alluded to the fact that I couldn't be a medievalist because I'd have to read the primary documents in the original language. Now our original language is English, but most historical documents, unless you're talking about mid to late 20th century, are going to be handwritten. And I am seeing the switch of many of my interns that come can't read cursive. And so that's number one. If you love history, by hook or by crook, learn to read cursive. It's not that bad. It will serve you in good stead. Also, consider public history. So I'm a public historian, not an academic historian. And there are many avenues for public historians. If you're pigeonholed into thinking that being a historian means being a professor or an author, you're missing the wide scope of other opportunities for historians.
That's interesting because you don't think about there being different types of historians. You're right.
Yes.
You think about, people being Indiana Jones and just being in like a room full of artifacts, teaching other kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really interesting. Where do you see yourself going from here?
No place.
That's a good answer. Yeah.
I absolutely love the Duxbury Royal and Historical Society. I've been there for 14 years. It's loved me very well also. The people are great. The community is great. And I, having processed about 500 collections in the archives, I've read everybody's gossip. I know who everybody is. If I walked down a street in 1832, I would know more people than I do now in Duxbury. And I would never be able to do that, repeat that again in another institution. So I am very happily situated, and the Duxbury Royal and Historical Society is a great place to be.
And that's a great place to leave off. Carolyn, thank you so much for joining
You're
us
welcome.
today. Hey friend, thanks for stopping by. If you like this video by The Local Scene, share the love and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe.